is where we're going to go today. It's lesson number 7 back there, Landon. We're going to start in chapter 19 today and see God's covenant with Israel. Verses 4 through 6 of chapter 19, we see the Mosaic Sinaitic covenant between God and Israel. It's a conditional covenant and temporal rather than the unconditional and permanent like the Noahic covenant in Genesis and the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 12 and 9. But this is another covenant that we'll see with Israel. Let's do something first. Now, I won't make this very difficult, just to kind of help prove a point. Let's play Simon Says. All right, I'm not going to make you stand up or do anything, but just some simple things. Simon Says, first of all, turn your head to the left. Good. Simon Says, turn your head to the right. Simon Says, turn your head up. Look down. Good. Simon Says, clap your hands. Simon Says, look forward. Keep clapping your hands. Good. Oh, yeah, I got some of you all. I could have made you stand up, get up, turn around, all stuff we do at camp or do little kids, but this is kind of proof of point, right? Simon Says is a simple game. It's a fun game. But how seriously do you take so say if we were in a really intense game of Simon Says and we're trying to beat some teenagers or whatever the case may have been, how seriously do you take some of Simon's instructions? And I think just in the 3 or 4 basic instructions that I gave you, a couple of you were quick to follow, a couple of you messed up a couple times. Comparison, how seriously do we take God's instructions? Okay. Now, if we're honest with ourselves, probably all could admit that we oftentimes disobey God as if the instructions were inconsequential, kind of like Simon's were. So as you look today at I am the instructor and God's covenant that he gives with Israel, we're going to show not just what the covenant is, but the reason for the respect that we should have of God's covenant and for the instructions that he gives us and how we should be compelled to obey him. Okay? Our love for God should motivate our obedience for him. Right? I'm going to say it probably a couple times as we go through this. Our love for God should motivate our obedience. And our love for him should motivate our desire to please him, right? Now, at our house right now, there's Play-Doh everywhere, right? Pippa loves Play-Doh, and we have lots of Play-Doh. And if I was to have brought a couple cans with me and have given you that Play-Doh, and just given you a couple of minutes to make something kind of model out of that Play-Doh, and then once you made the model, come up with 2 or 3 like little warnings about the model, how you should use it, how you shouldn't use it, and maybe like instructions that would have appeared on your model's product label, right? And we all know those instructions on product labels that are there. Why is it important, first of all, to have directions or instructions or even warnings for products? Why do products have instruction labels and warning labels on them? What's the reasoning for those there? Safety, so you know how to use it, when to use it, how not to use it, what not to use it for. So those are all important things that product labels have. And then, of course, we all know the consequences a lot of times of not following those product labels, right? Not following instructions that are given. I remember being probably 8 or 9 years old and Grandma and Grandpa Compton going up to Ohio to see Uncle Tim for a week. And Grandma Grandma giving me instructions to water her flowers. And of course, you all know Grandma very well. There's nothing in a bottle that was actually, it was a reused bottle for something, right? There was always, if you went to got in the refrigerator and there was a Country Crock butter thing, you can guarantee there wasn't butter in there. It was something else she had made. And she recycled stuff all the time. Well, she had also used, I had seen her previously use old Clorox bottles to put Miracle-Gro in and shake up and leave out there to put in her flowers. She had given me instructions to water the flowers, and I went and found the Clorox bottle, which I thought was the Miracle-Gro bottle, but it was actually the Clorox bottle, and she got back and all her flowers were dead. And she oftentimes reminds me of that, and has reminded me of that a couple of times. But of course, the important thing to know what the labels are and the products, what they're used for, and the consequences of ignoring those labels. Obviously, it should have been easy to smell the Clorox and know, but I didn't know any better at the time. But we know, again, the reason for labels and the importance for it, and what happens when you ignore those instructions. Now, as we're going to see today and probably the next couple of weeks, God called out Israel out of Egypt, made them his own, and then shortly after, as we're going to see here in chapter 19, gave them instructions for use and warnings for misuse. So therefore they could live in accordance with his desires. Now we're going to look at the Ten Commandments, of course, the famous section of God's instructions for Israel's life after redemption. So, first thing here is this, okay? This is the area in which the children of Israel are. Of course, they're going to be at Mount Sinai. You can see very easily right where that is at. And this is the place, of course, where God makes this covenant with Israel. As I said, the verses 4, 5, and 6, we're going to see the actual covenant. This is a temporal covenant. It's got conditions to it. If this, then this, essentially, is what this means. Again, difference from the unconditional and permanent covenant that we've talked about through Genesis. Okay? And here is the basics of this. I keep pointing at the TV. Of this covenant. All right? We're going to see here as we look through this today. Let's read verses 1 through 4 here of chapter 19. In the third month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. So how long now have the children of Israel been out of Egypt? 90 days. It's really not that long, right? It's really, if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that long. 3 months they've been doing this. The same day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount. And Moses went up unto God and the Lord, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thou shalt say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. So God gives Moses here in the first couple of verses a message for, first of all, he calls them the house of Jacob and the children of Israel. Okay? Now, the change in name, right? While he uses house of Jacob and nation of Israel there, the change in name shows a shift from Israel as a big family, house of Jacob, to Israel as a nation, children of Israel. Okay, there's a shifting here. There's them being this big family to them actually being a nation. Okay, Moses delivers God's message here to the nation. All right, the children of Israel, and it begins with this summary one more time of what God has done for them. So we start off with a summary of what God has done for them so far. He uses the metaphor or the example here, the imagery of a mother eagle encouraging the little eaglets out of her nest so that they can fly. Right? We see that in verse 4. Ye see what I have done unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. So that's the imagery that God is using here. And God uses this image, to help kind of make Israelites a little more, give them an object lesson of what He's done for them. In creation, of course, we know this, and you see this all over the internet or YouTube, or if you watch any Planet Earth videos or anything. In nature, the mother eagle, of course, will kind of stir up the nest and force her eaglets to learn to fly by carrying them, of course, up on her wings. And then she protects them from falling until they're able to soar on their own, right? The wings a little bit, and then she may even sometimes nudge them out of the nest, and then as she kind of swoops under till they figure out how to use the wings, right? How to use their wings on their own, how to fly and how to soar on their own. In a sense here, Egypt would have been the nest for Israel. Okay? The hardships that they faced, but they had their needs, food and water and stuff, taken care of. It wasn't easy for them in Egypt, but they had the basic needs taken care of. Shelter met without any type of interruption. They didn't have to worry about feeding their families or having a place to call their own. God took the initiative to lead them out of that nest, that safety nest, and force them to fly. Okay, so we see why he uses the imagery here of a mother eagle in the wings, of using the wings. While they're journeying to the promised land, Israel on several occasions longed for what? They longed for the safety of that nest, right? They wanted to go back to that nest, resenting God and even questioning his motives. Why else might Israel long for Egypt when they face these difficult circumstances? Not only was it their basic necessities, of course, but why else might have they longed for Egypt? What else was there in Egypt? What? I feel like they had what they needed. Everything was there. What else?
Culturally, it was built up, and it wasn't a wilderness.
Exactly. It wasn't just out in the middle of nowhere. There were things there that protected them and that helped them. I know, like, after we go on vacation for a while, or I've been gone for a while, I'm looking forward to getting back home. And why is that? It's familiar, right? That's where we're raising kids, where we have memories at. It's where we're used to. We know where the light switches are. We know everything's at. There's a familiarity with it. It represented all the things that were familiar to them. Okay, so not just their basic needs, but it was just easy to live. It was easier for them to live there than being out into the wilderness. So during this journey, we see them longing several times to go back for Egypt. Not just for basic necessities, but because they knew that they would be okay there. It would be hard, but they would be okay there. Now, it's not hard to imagine the little eagle kind of getting upset with mama for kicking him out of the nest, right, and forcing him to potentially die, right, flying out of the nest with him not being able to use his wings yet, and questioning the mother's motives here. To leave the familiar smells and surroundings of that nest for some completely unfamiliar and terrifying events. I'm sure the first time that a mother eagle knocks the eaglet out, it's quite the traumatic experience. Same thing here for the Israelites. But what's better for the eaglet? Staying in the nest or learning to fly? Learning to fly, right? It's much better for the overall livelihood of this little eagle. Same thing with the Israelites here, right? In the same way, the Israelites needed to learn to follow God's instructions for life. They needed to mature in their faith and to learn to trust in God. Now, we don't really know how much the analogy here actually influenced the Israelites. Being compared to the little eaglets, I'm sure to them at the time, not real flattering. But Israel should have at least realized that they had a time of learning that was coming ahead of them. Okay, so that's the leadership we see first of all in the first 4 verses. Now we get down verses 5 and 6, and we're going to see some of the conditions here of this covenant. God demands loyalty. We're going to see here in return for his care. So we're going to see God say, I'm going to take care of you. Make sure your needs are met. Make sure you have the things you need to survive. But you need to be obedient to me. I will take care of you if you are obedient. Okay? The law then provides the stipulations for the covenant blessings. And we'll jump over in a little bit to Deuteronomy, and we'll see another conditional covenant, the Deuteronomic Palestinian covenant. Enjoyment of life in the Promised Land was tied to direct obedience to God. So we're going to see a couple of those things there. So we see, first of all, God's leadership. Now we get to verses 5 and 6, and we see the beginnings of the conditions as well as the blessings. So let's go to verse 5 and 6 of chapter 19. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice. Right? He doesn't, this is what the conditions are, guys, up front. If you do this, I'll do this. If this, then this. Okay? If you obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So God continues his message here by sharing three benefits. Right? There are three benefits here that the people of Israel would realize and they would get if they obeyed him and kept the covenant with him. Okay, God said Israel, first of all, will become a peculiar treasure. Secondly, a kingdom of priests. And thirdly, a holy nation. Okay, those are the three parts of the blessings. Now, what did Israel know about being treated as a special treasure by other people? What did Israel know about being treated as a special treasure by other people? Had they been treated as a special treasure by other people? Nothing, right? They had no idea what being treated as a special treasure meant, right? Again, remember what life was like for them back in Egypt. They'd been abused, ridiculed, even murdered by the Egyptians. So they don't know what that's like. God is choosing and has chose Israel to be his special treasure. This means that Israel is valuable to God, right? It's not just common things. God uses the language valuable treasure, right? Peculiar treasure, special, unique to God. And then he goes on to say he's the Lord of all the earth. He has all these things, can do all these things. It's important for them to understand what that means to be a special treasure. But it was not as if God had to settle for Israel, right? A lowly people, the other nations would have considered just as a commodity to have them around and to use them as slaves rather than an actual nation. God could have selected anybody, any nation, any people on the earth at this time to be his people. After all, as their creator, he owns all of them. Could God have picked the Egyptians? Yes. God created the Egyptians. He could have picked them. The Palestinians, the Amorites, all the ones that we know. He doesn't, though. He chooses Israel, even over Egypt, with all of Egypt's brilliant gold, massive structures, superior intellect, strong armies, incredible wealth, all the things that the Egyptians have. He still chose the Israelites. Quite a privilege and a responsibility here for the Israelites, this newly liberated nation. Not just this band of people, but this actual nation. Israel was also going to become kingdom of priests, secondly. God intends here for every Israelite to show God's truth and to show God's blessings to other nations. That's what that means there when he calls them kingdom of priests. He's going to use Israel, and he expects Israel to show and reveal God's truth and blessings to other nations. Other nations here would learn about God and his blessings through the Israelites as God's people lived for him. Serving other gods, worshiping idols, however, of course, we know is going to destroy the Israelites' role as the kingdom of priests. The third one was a holy nation, the third blessing. Israel has the opportunity here to become a holy nation. Now, to be holy, a good Awana term here, a holy means what? Set apart, exactly. Holy means to be set apart, not like anything else, okay? And Israel was to be set apart to the Lord. God gave Israel specific instructions on what that set-apart life looks like, okay? And as the people lived set apart to God, they in turn are going to reflect His holiness, okay? Go over to Leviticus chapter 11, please. Oh goodness, we're going to Leviticus. If you weren't sleepy yet, right? Leviticus chapter 11. And go to verse 44 and 45. For I am the Lord your God, and ye shall therefore sanctify yourselves. What does that mean? What sanctify mean? What? Set apart, right? Yeah, set apart yourself. And you shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall ye defile yourself with any manner of creeping things that creepeth upon the earth. For I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. Jump over to chapter 20 with me and go to verse 26. And ye shall be holy unto me, for I am the Lord, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have done what? What severed mean? Separated, set apart, right? Severed you from other people, that ye should be mine. Why did God want Israel to be holy? Because He was holy, and He had separated them from the other nations by choosing them. Okay? Israel was freed from Egypt. They belonged to God. That meant that they weren't free to do whatever they pleased. They actually would not have been freedom at all, right? So Israel was freed from Egypt, but they belonged to God. So therefore, they aren't free to do whatever they please. Again, that wouldn't have been actual freedom. Why is being free to do whatever you desire or whatever we desire not true freedom? Because our nature, we are what? And we're slaves to our sinful nature, right? Living according to our desires is being a slave to those desires. So it's not, in fact, actual freedom, okay? Go to Romans chapter 6 with me. We've got time. Let's go there. Romans 6. Because I think this idea of thinking we can make our own choice and that being freedom, I think that's a stumbling block for people, right? Because in fact, it's just the opposite. Where we think, well, I can do whatever I want to. We're still a slave to our own sinful desires. Romans chapter 6, verse 15. What then shall we sin because we are not under the law, but under grace? God forbid. Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey his servants, ye are to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death, or of obedience unto righteousness. But God be thanked that you were the servants of sin, but ye have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered you. Being then made free from sin, ye became the servants of righteousness. I speak after the manner of men, because of the infirmity of your flesh. For as ye have yielded your members servants to uncleanliness and to iniquity, even so now yield your members servants to righteousness and to holiness. For when ye were the servants of sin, ye were free from righteousness. What fruit had ye then in those things whereof ye are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death. But now being made free from sin and become servants to God, ye have your fruit unto holiness, and the end everlasting life. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So living to our own desires makes us slaves to unholiness. But living to God's desires, we have freedom in knowing that while we're serving God in righteousness, we are acting set apart, holy, like God is holy, because that's what he has required and called us to do. Okay? I've said this before. There's freedom in serving God, right? Because we know that, hey, we ain't got to worry about it, right? We don't have to worry about the decisions, the outcome. We know that if God is in control, he's truly in control of the life. We have freedom in knowing we're following after him, because he's always going to make the right decisions. We're always going to get the best outcome. God is always going to have us exactly where he wants us. All right? So, the Israelites didn't free themselves of a master when they left Egypt. They simply changed masters. And a much better change, of course, it was. God was their new master, and that was a great honor for the Israelites. Now, we get to verses 7 and 8 of chapter 19, flip back over to Exodus, and we see Israel's response to this. So we see the blessing, we see the covenant, or the conditions, and now we're going to see the response in verses 7 and 8. And Moses came and called for the elders of the people, and laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord hath spoken we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord. Okay, so Moses calls the elders together, shares the commandment from God with them, and we see the nation of Israel, not the house of Jacob, the actual nation of Israel as a whole responding how? They're going to do what? Everything God says, we're going to do, right? All that the Lord hath spoken, we will do. Now, since God has only spoken here in generalities about his commands, Israel didn't see a reason for not agreeing to follow what he said. Now, little did they know that his law was going to be very specific, life-encompassing, and as immature people with a full understanding of neither the true character of God and the ways of God's ways, nor their own limitations and sinfulness, Israel thought they could live in obedience to God. God says it, we'll do it. He says go here, we'll go here. It shouldn't be a big deal. He's taking care of us. No, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay? Now, their failures over just the first 3 months since leaving Egypt should have been a clue to them on their inability to obey God's rules. But, of course, we know that their hearts are very immature, their relationship very immature with God. Most likely, their own impressions of what it would mean to obey God clouded their understanding on what true obedience to God was going to entail. Now we're back to this, right? We saw this not long ago. Just as in just 3 months, probably less than that, in all honesty, we see kind of their attitude towards God being their leader and leading them to Mount Sinai. Saw the test of Mara, the bad water, what shall we drink? Wilderness of sin, no food. Oh, we should have been better off dying in Egypt. Back to Rephidim with no water. God is not even here. He's trying to kill us. It's just how quickly it is. What are we going to eat? I should have said in Egypt. He's not even here anymore. So you can see how quickly the growing dissatisfaction has been. We may say that Israel's willingness to obey was kind of similar to a teenager agreeing to do something dad says to do. Right? Or a 2-year-old being told to get off the table and not jump off the coffee table. Kind of the same thing. Answering the question, will you do something for me in return, doesn't take a lot of true commitment here. Let's go to verse 9 now. And we see God's stipulations for a covenant blessing. Let's go to Exodus 9 through 15. And this is where we'll finish up with today. So Moses goes back to God and tells him the response from the Israelites. And then after hearing Moses' report about the people's response, he tells him he's coming in a thick cloud and speaking so that the people are going to be able to hear him. Right? So go to verse 9 of chapter 19. And the Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. Now let's read down to verse 15. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people, and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. And be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And they shall set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that ye go not up unto the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever touches the mount shall be surely put to death, or shall be surely put to death. There shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it is beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet soundeth long, they shall come up to the mountain. And Moses went down from the mount unto the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said unto the people, Be ready against the third day, come not at your wives. So Israel here had some preparation for God showing up on the Mount Sinai. And God instructed Moses on exactly what the people were supposed to do to prepare for this arrival of God on Mount Sinai. Moses was to consecrate the people, have them wash their clothes, and then the reason for this, the washing of their clothes, pictured the cleansing that needed to happen inside the Israelites. Okay, they've been walking around in the wilderness, dirt and dust and grime and all that stuff, and we know that clothes and stuff were dirty. We know their insides were dirty as well. We've seen that happen now. So them washing their clothes here kind of was a symbolism of that. The removal of dirt would be respectful of God's holiness and illustrate the need to be clean. Okay, and clean, of course, be holy, both at the heart level when God arrived here on the third day. Moses also was to set up a barrier, right? And where was this barrier to be set up at? Around what? Base of the mountain, right? There was to be a barrier around the base of the mountain. To keep people from even thinking about touching the mountain. Because if they touched the mountain, what was going to happen to them? On the spot, right? They're going to die. Don't touch the mountain, you're going to be put to death. God prescribed stones and arrows as the means of execution, so the executioners would not even have to touch the bodies of the people who had violated it, right? We see them be shot through or stoned to death because God didn't want people to even touch the bodies who had disobeyed him and touched the mountain. Okay? The long-sounded trumpet was the signal for the people to come near to the mountain and for Moses to ascend upon it. All right, we see it there in verses 12 and 13. Moses returns to the people and communicates all of these instructions, adding that the husbands were not even to go near their wives for 3 days prior to God's arrival. This mandatory abstinence was a matter of further consecration. It is not an indication that the physical relationship between husband and wife is somehow sinful. It's just another way of further concreting this consecration that God had given them. Okay? So for 3 days now, the Israelites are going through this. They're washing stuff. They're waiting there, and they're listening to what Moses had to say and awaiting God's arrival. Now, when we get down to verse 16, which we're not going to get into today, we're going to start that in 2 weeks, and we'll see God's arrival and his warning. Now, this is mountain, thick cloud showing up on this mountain. This is a dramatic arrival, right? This would have been an instance, something they would have definitely remembered. God is arriving this way because he's about to give them something very important. Okay. And he gives them the law, of course, in chapter 20, but he sees the arrival and the warning. That's going to be coming next as we get back into this in a couple of weeks. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the lesson that we have. Thank you for the fact that you took this nation and were so patient and kind and sovereign in your dealing with them, even though they didn't deserve it. And the promises you've given them, Lord, and the blessings you bestowed upon them too. Lord, it's encouraging for us to read and know that the God of Israel, God of the Israelites, the God who parted the Red Seas, who sent the plagues, who brought the Ten Commandments down, who revealed himself to Moses in a burning bush that didn't burn up, led these people in clouds of smoke and fire, pillars of cloud and the Lord pillar of fire, and did all these things. Lord, it's the exact same God that we serve today. And we just encouraging to us to remember the power and the might that you have. It's also encouraging to us, Lord, that you have the ability, but also have the compassion to know us on an intimate level and want us to know you more intimately, and desire for us, Lord, to seek after your face, seek after your holiness, and to make ourselves and mirror ourselves, Lord, to your character and to your in ways is more and more every day. Comes with some stepping stones and some bruised heels and some whippings along the way, Lord, but it should be our heart's desire, Lord, to follow after you, and I pray that it is. And we know we are just constantly seeking to draw ourselves closer and closer to you, not just because of the blessings, but because you deserve it. So we thank you for that, Lord, and thank you for the opportunity that we have to be able to do that. We thank you for this study we've been going through in Exodus, and what you've been teaching us through it. Seeing evidence, Lord, of people who will follow and the blessings that will follow, and people who won't follow, and then the consequences that follow that as well. Just as more object lessons for us, Lord, in our own walk. I pray for Pastor Rob as he comes here the next little bit. Let's just use him in a mighty way, Lord. Keep us attentive